Okay, so welcome to another episode of the JUXT cast. With us, we've got myself, Malcolm Sparks, and
Joanna Antonelli,
Håkan Råberg,
Alex Davis,
and
John Pither.
So, as is the tradition on the podcast, we have a new member of the cast, Håkan Råberg. So we're going to do a quick origin story. So Håkan, how did you get into programming?
I had a Commodore 64 when I was in school. So I started programming when I was 8, roughly, and wrote various text adventure games in BASIC. And eventually I got an Amiga. I started graduating into assembler, writing slightly more advanced games with graphics. So this was maybe when I was 11, which would have been late 80s. After that, for a while, I tried very hard to not program, but eventually I realized that, no, you can actually have quite fun and earn some money by doing this. So in the late 90s, during the dot-com boom, I started working again. My first paid job was writing a Java applet, which I estimated to take 1 week to build, which took 6 months and never really worked. But, well, I've been trying to improve since then, but haven't been easy.
So how did you get into Clojure, Håkan?
Well, so after my first Java applet, I wrote lots of other, well, eventually Java servlets came out, right, like in J2E and all that stuff. So I wrote a lot of Java for a long, long time. And at some point I felt like, oh, JVM is great, and I've been investing, well, at that point, a large part of my career on the JVM. So I decided to, when Clojure came out, that this was actually, felt very appealing. And I had already been messing around, very early on, and this goes way back. There used to be something called, I think it was called Bistro, which was like a Smalltalk compile to JVM, which was like in the 90s. And that was quite cool, but it's like more or less pointless. But eventually, I think Clojure was the first real non-Java JVM language I used in anger, I would say. So I was traveling around the world at the time, so I was having this programming Clojure book by Holloway, and I read it on a beach, and I left it on the beach somewhere as well. And I wrote like a Pac-Man game in Clojure, and I felt like this is quite cool. So then eventually I came back to London, and unassumingly managed to convince John to use Clojure on a project we were working on together in a bank in London. This has been discussed on Euroclojure 2012 in our talk in the first Euroclojure here in London. And a precursor to that, actually, which is quite interesting, is that I took John and Oliver Hine, which also works for JUXT, and a few other people from our team in the bank to watch Malcolm Sparks do talk about Clojure at his bank, just to prove to my team that people are actually using Clojure. So, and eventually this maybe didn't lead to internal love, but for John and Malcolm to hook up, and here we are today in JUXT.
The first Euroclojure was 2012, and that was Rich Hickey was there, Stu Holloway, all the gang, and it was a kind of the first Clojure conference. Who organised it? It was Marco Abyss.
Marco Abyss.
Yeah, and you knew Marco.
Yeah, he was a colleague of mine and John's from ThoughtWorks, actually. So we knew. I actually met Marco in a pizza place in Liverpool Street somewhere, and he asked, I remember, is it a good idea to organize a Clojure conference? It's like, are we ready for this? Like, is the industry? And I, without knowing anything, I said, of course, it's a great idea to organize a Clojure conference. And I agreed to come and speak. So me and John submitted this talk about our project, which we had done. I don't remember exactly what happened back then, because Mark and me, we met for lunch, but I don't remember which order happened. But I feel that he knew that I was working professionally in Clojure, which at the time, people were doing it, right? But it wasn't like extremely common, and I guess it's still not. So he was just listening a little bit, like, how do you feel the scene is like? And again, I said, so we did this talk.
How did Marco get into Clojure? Don't tell me. He was walking along a beach, and he found a book.
Potentially, yeah. Somewhere. No, I don't know exactly how he got into Clojure, and I think he more felt that this is a great, it's technology up and coming, and it's time for a conference. I think I was more interested in the organizing side of it, but.
And then you did a conference talk. This is the first time I became aware of John and you, Håkan, because you had this samurai-inspired massacre at the middle office. It was based on the Seven Samurai or something. I remember some of the slides.
Yes, this is actually another film, what is this film called again? I should remember. 13 Assassins, maybe, or something. Yeah, I think it's called. And it's a Mickey film, which is like, he has done loads of, not just samurai films, but other kind of ultra-violent, or more or less ultra-violent films. Anyway, our project wasn't actually ultra-violent, but it was, still quite tough.
Yeah, well, that was a while ago, 7 years ago.
Yeah,
this summer.
Yeah.
And so after that, I mean, so Euroclosure has carried on, but this year it's kind of, we're not going to have a Euroclosure, are we? And it's changed to Heart of Clojure, and we're going. There's going to be, how many of us going?
There are about 11 of us. Heart of Clojure.
Right, so we're going to be there on the Eurostart if the rails haven't buckled on the
Yeah, if they've
overhead
not melted.
lines.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking forward to you're going. So I don't know when this is going out. Alex, do you know when this is going out?
Yesterday.
Probably just after Heart of Clojure.
So we had a great time at Heart of Clojure. It was really fantastic to see everyone there. Thanks for coming.
Really like those Crux tutorials that you were
Yeah.
It was amazing. It
Yeah.
was so fun to go through.
Yeah, and particularly that thing on the Thursday, the 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or
It's 4 o'clock, yeah?
the Crux tutorial that
Yeah.
you're giving,
Yeah.
Joanna, with the space and the time
Space
travel.
theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what else is happening at Heart of Clojure? What else are we announcing? So new Crux features. We've been talking this afternoon about the Crux console, which so Håkan is. Do we call him the father of Crux or the
adoptive father of Crux, potentially, because I think John wrote a lot of the initial version of Crux, and there may even be some of it left.
Well, John is grandfather of Crux. No, that doesn't work, does it?
I'm sure. But
So
Co-parenting.
co-parenting, yeah.
Okay.
Modern family.
Yeah.
So you were telling me earlier about the origin story of Crux, and so you were with John, working on a team
Yeah.
in another bank.
Yeah, another bank, 7 years later. And we were solving it, well, we didn't solve it directly by the temporal problem. There was a temporal aspect to the problem. But in the end of the day, what ended up happening is that we took a system we had built, which had a problem with ingestion speed, and we ripped out the back end of it and put in RocksDB to basically be able to ingest at any point in time. Because suddenly the business could come and say, like, I want to have this data from some other point in time, and I'll put it in there. And we wanted it all to be in the same timeline. So it was like a slightly bitemporal element to it. So you could just basically start ingesting from it. And also it was much quicker to ingest into this thing. But because it ripped out the existing backend, we had a GraphQL front end, but we ripped out the existing backend. We had to basically, so now we had stored the new data. It was much faster to get it in. We had a graph query thing that already existed, but we needed to gel these things together. So in a way, you could say that some of the early ideas for Crux come from there, like how we wrote the GraphQL resolvers to actually do. This wasn't Datalog, like the original system used Datalog, but this wasn't. So no, so that's after we did that project, and we I guess to some extent can argue we successfully delivered it, at least some version of it. We took a step back and started looking at like where the common elements are. And there was another aspect to this thing, which was where you needed to almost branch or tag things in different points of time and update them later. So that's more bitemporal things. We took a step back and looked, okay, what we actually want to solve in a more generic, reusable way. And then we started working on Crux. And I remember the first time I heard of Crux was in the lounge of Paddington Station, where me and John sat down, and he told me we were considering building a database based on some of the experience we've had. Are you interested? And I said that, yeah, I think so. And then I know that Malcolm and John, which maybe Malcolm talk more about, you guys you went to Sweden without me for some reason, and then you actually had a Swedish Crux experience.
Yeah, we had a Viking experience,
Yeah.
actually. And we were drinking mead and eating Viking food. I don't know why you went there, Håkan. Anyway, it was a place in Gamla Stan in Stockholm, which is where you're from, right?
I'm from Stockholm, not from Gamla Stan. But
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were Vikings for a night, and then I don't know how many glasses of mead we'd had later, but then the word Crux popped into the. John, can you remember?
I think we were definitely drinking mead, and I think at one point we just decided that we'd built this big data fabric at a bank, and it solved some problems and was a way to generalize it. I think we were later in Bristol on a completely different project, and we were trying to come up with names for this data store, and it had to be 4 letters. So we're walking around, and is it wood? Is it deck? Just thinking of names. And after the 5th cocktail, I think you pronounced that it shall be thus called Crux.
And was there a reason behind Crux? Was it what did Crux refer to in that moment after 5 cocktails?
Well, it sounded a funky name, and then retrospectively you kind of think, well, why was it a good idea? And I think that, Crux had this, Crux means cross, So it's the intersection, which is when you're doing a join and doing a data log query, you're joining things, and so you're finding for the intersection between different data sets. So I thought that worked. And then it's also the 88th constellation. It's the smallest constellation, and John and I and other JUXTers are pretty into astronomy, so we like constellations and of course the 4-letter words. And so there was a few things that made it work, and so we named it before we kind of searched for trademarks or anything like that.
And it's also you have the intersection between valid time and transaction time in bitemporal space, but that may have not been thought of at the time.
Has now.
It has now, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't know they'd met at Paddington Station, so we could have called it Bear, couldn't we?
Yeah. I think the first name I wanted to call it was Leaf or something.
Leaf.
That was rejected quite resoundingly by you.
Yeah.
Or Ding.
That's it. So anyway, so what else are we announcing at Heart of Clojure? So new conference, John?
Yeah, so we're looking at a new conference called XT20.
Which has already been announced.
Which has already been announced.
Can you buy your ticket at the moment?
No.
Okay.
But we're presuming yes.
By the time you're listening to this, dear listener, you can go to where to buy the ticket?
Okay, so right now you can buy a ticket at xt20.tech.
Right. So what is XT20?
So XT20 is, well, the XT brand is about looking at the extremes of tech. So going to the limits of what we understand now and looking at new ways of doing things. And it's trying to understand like where are we going, and if we want to solve the big problems of today, if we want to dream big, then what solutions and processes will we need? How can we change our game? How can we meet these challenges? So what we've decided to do for XT20 in search of these answers is to go back in time. So we're looking at the way the Victorians did things, because they had a seriousness, didn't they, Malcolm? They built the bridges, the railways, the steam engines, and they really dreamed big. And there's maybe a sense that we've lost some optimism, or we've lost that sort of daring to dream. And what we want to think about now is not necessarily to go back in time. It's like we've evolved, we've moved on, we do things a different way now. But can we recapture that sense of optimism, and can we dream big again? Can we look at the big challenges? And now with the technologies and the tools that we have, can we meet those challenges?
Yeah, so we were in London on Tuesday night. I think we were doing some kind of filming. We had to go to a pub, didn't we, for a particular reason, and we did a little movie announcing the conference with the theme of "It's time to get to work," which is very much the previous conference that JUXT organised back in 2016 was XT16, which had more of a playful experimental feel, that we were saying, let's discover new tools and let's sharpen our tools. But this conference is very much a playful side, but also a serious side.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the previous conference was about, like, we have to be creative, we have to play and to experiment, and we have to unleash the play part of our brain to really think of the new ideas. Like, if we're dogmatic and we don't engage like the more playful parts of our brain, then we won't reach for things like Clojure, or we won't think, well, there's some other tool out there, let's give it a go, let's play, let's imagine. So that was a powerful message, and I think that's how we all came to where we are now, by daring to play with things and to give things a go. But I think what we really want to do in our lives, or what I feel is something missing there, which is, it's work where we can derive meaning. It's like I come to work because I want to build something, I want to create something. And it's about bringing those two sides together. Yes, we want to play, we want to be creative, we want to have a good workplace. But XT20 is about, let's dream big, but it's time to get to work.
In fact, I mean, when we were on the tube, we were talking about it's time to get to work. And then we got out of the tube, and there were these Evening Standards, that are this free newspaper in London, and we picked up one each. Not that we normally read one, but I noticed the front was a picture of Britain's new Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying it's time to get to work. So he
obviously got the message.
He obviously had so in that vibe, we thought it was about time to say, well, we got there first. That's our slogan. But we were keen to get that video out so if you've seen the video, that's why we were both reading the Evening Standard. We're not really reading it. I mean, it's a bit of but that's the reason why that headline, if you want to look for that Easter egg, it's there.
So there's also the steampunk theme you're going for as well. It's maybe worth mentioning.
Yeah, we had this challenge in that it's a bit cart before horse, I have to admit, but the venue that we've selected is this beautiful Victorian music hall. It's just fantastic. So it's a great venue for us to get on stage, and it's got like a balcony around, and everyone can stand and look down, and you can imagine we're going to have some jolly good fun whilst we're there. But we had this sort of juxtaposition of this Victorian music hall, but also we wanted to bring the extreme technology, which is what the XT brand is about. It's what we're trying to do. So we had a conundrum, which is, well, what sort of genre do you get this Victorian music thing going on, this Victorian element, but then also extreme technology? And then apparently there's this thing called steampunk, which I didn't really know about. I mean, I'd seen some movies like the Wild Wild West and things, but yeah, so steampunk it is. We're going all steampunk.
So tickets are available at the moment on the website. How much are they? About 300 quid?
Yeah, we think it's going to be about that price point. There might be some early bird discount codes that might be forthcoming
Yeah, if you
for the Heart of Clojure event.
Yes, right. If you went to Heart of Clojure, you should get an email from the Heart of Clojure organisers. There's Martin Klepsch and Arnie Brasser, who's going to send you a personalised code, and you can use that code on the website to get a discount on the ticket.
Or if you're watching this after Clojure Tray, then potentially the same for Clojure Tray as well.
Oh yes, of course.
So tell us about who's going to be talking. How are you going to choose who's talking at the conference?
Well, I can't reveal who is talking yet because it's too early to tell. We're keeping that under wraps as we plan and do our final selection. What I would say is that XT20 is a little bit different to most conferences in that it's curated. So it's a process of us dreaming big, really, and thinking, who do we really want to talk? Like, who is pioneering, that has ideas that we listen to and we want to learn more from? So we will go and find those people. And as time progresses, you'll see some interesting videos as we release those and interview those people ahead of the event. But hopefully it won't be too long before we sort of unveil the first speaker.
Yeah, I would say if you're listening to this and you are inspired by the theme of a conference and about dreaming big and using tech to solve big problems, and you have some interesting talk or relevant talk, then please get in touch because we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's a curated conference, but if someone has something to say, then we're definitely interested in listening.
So Alex, you've got and you're a kind of designated audiovisual expert.
Well, I wouldn't say expert, but person who happens to be doing some audiovisual stuff, sure.
So you've got a new toy this week.
Yeah, well, it's a very exciting week.
Okay, segment of so this is the toy of the week segment.
Toy of the week.
Toy of the week.
Toy of the week. Come on, John, let's have it.
On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Toy of the week.
Brilliant. And that is the sort of high quality audiovisual content that at JUXT we're trying to produce.
Is that not why you need to spend lots of money on the equipment?
Well, it would be a waste of our talent if we didn't spend lots of money on equipment, because I think we've all realised that we're born not just to be programmers, but to make
to buy stuff.
To buy stuff.
So what is this thing called the wibbly wobbly?
It's become known as the wibbly wobbly thing because I think the product name is the Weeble, which is an interesting name. Basically, you put a camera on it, and then no matter how wibbly wobbly your hands are, the camera stays unwibbly wobbled.
My hands are quite wibbly wobbly.
If you sort of kind of move the chicken around, then the chicken's head stays in the same position.
And the other thing, I've got on my phone here, I can see what the camera's looking at.
Oh wow!
And I can move the camera around and control all the settings and that sort of thing.
So the wibbly wobbly itself has a sort of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth module.
Yeah. There's a cable that connects into the camera, and then I connect on my phone.
So we had the wibbly wobbly out on in London this week. So it had a little trip.
Yeah. So when we'd been to the pub and we'd done our little film on the sofas with the Boris Johnson on the newspaper, and then we were pretty nearby to the venue for XT20, so we thought we'd go along and do some footage so that people could actually see where the conference was being held. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed into the main rooms, but we were allowed into sort of the small bar area, I guess.
The breakout spaces.
The breakout space, yeah. And we didn't have much time there, so we just kind of got the wibbly wobbly out, and then did a sort of one take of John running around trying to think of things at the top of his head, and then Malcolm was just sitting in the corner playing the piano, sang a little song. So
And I had to make up that song at the time I was playing it, which wasn't easy.
yeah, I mean, I think all things considered.
It's quite impressive.
Yeah, so bear that in mind when you watch the video, because
Yeah.
that does explain the lacking of quality. But
We'll leave a link to the video on the show notes. I'm not sure if we're going to actually publicise the video or not, but you, as a listener to the podcast, you'll be able to get an exclusive peek at the high quality content that we're putting out.
I've seen a few of these John and Malcolm videos. Are they all going to be available?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, they're such high quality videos that I think the world would be losing out.
We're trying to make the world a better place, one video at a time.
Exactly.
So that ends a segment of
Toy of the week.
Ding.
Okay, now you can do the intro.
Well, I've got to add something to the list now.
Yeah, Toy of the Week, the new segment. Well, now we have to buy a toy every week.
Toy of the quarter.
You got it? You ready?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the JUXT cast. We introduce XT20 and Alex talks about his wibbly wobbly in the new segment.
I mean,
That works.
yeah, I
That
think
was
it
quite
works.
funny. Yeah.